Morning, you're watching Metropole Television, most certainly business. My name is Simba Elijah Charles Kianga. Thank you very much for making time for your economic review this morning. We're giving you the biggest economic headlines that you're waking up to on this 24th of November 2020, just 6 days before the end of November. We usher in December this year, a year that can just be described as coronavirus stricken. All right, now a petition tabled in Parliament by the Dagoretti South Member of Parliament, John Kiare, could say the retired Auditor General and the Controller of Budget earn 80% of their salaries, among other perks, once they retire. Now, the members of Parliament Select Committee have been now asked by the Speaker of the National House to begin an inquiry as to why they too have never been offered the perks like retired presidents, which could see the public wage bill, which is already a burden to the country, shoot up. Now, the two officials are currently offered 30% gratuity, which is an equivalent of 30% of their total basic pay. Now, the committee now has 60 days, and should it pass, the two officials could start enjoying lifetime pension at the expense of the taxpayer. This morning, to help us put perspective in these headlines, we are joined by George Munga, he's the managing partner, AMG Kenya, and we're joined by Alexander Obino as well. Let me start with you, George Munga. Good morning, sir.
Morning, Elijah. How are you doing?
I'm very okay. Yes, should we pay pension for Auditor General and the Controller Budget?
I think, Elijah, my initial feeling is that this is a Trojan horse by the members of Parliament.
Yes.
To try and sneak back their quest for increased funds. Remember already the Auditor General, the retired Auditor General, and the Control Budget already received 30% of their gratuity, which to me I think is adequate enough, because these are persons who serve for fixed-term contracts, and for fixed-term contracts, Elijah, they have terms and conditions that you sign to when you are getting into these positions. So it is not as if when you are getting in, you don't know what remuneration or what benefits are likely to accrue to you when you are in office and when you leave office. Yes. So these are persons who are already aware of what benefits that were supposed to be given to them when they were in office and when they leave. So in my feeling, I think the MPs are using this as a Trojan horse to try and sneak back their quest for increased revenue. Elijah, remember the other day, Treasury said that they are not able to finance some of their debts, and if they cannot do that, then you don't expect us to start increasing our recurrent expenditure, wage bill being one of them. If you increase the benefits for these two, what prevents the members of Parliament from saying that you want to increase the benefits for the heads of parastatals, and then it will go down. Go down to other civil servants, and then eventually their own will come into play. This is the time to cut our salaries, cut our benefits, so that we can survive this season. Remember, Elijah, between March and now, so many private companies have either shed off their employees, yes, or they are giving half pay for most of their employees. I don't think this is the right time for such a conversation to be taking place, especially in Parliament. I think it's the wrong timing. The motive is suspect, and I doubt that is the end game to what the Member of Parliament is trying to push. In my opinion, they're trying to get a red herring so that they can push their own pay paths. If this passes, Elijah.
All right, let me bring in Alexander Obino this morning. Should I call you Obino AG, if you can allow me?
Yes.
Now, let's look at that. I mean, one of the biggest conversations for this government has been reduce our recurrent expenditure, and most importantly, the wage bill. I mean, if we task the National House with that, and the same people were sitting in that house this morning telling us, well, we need to give 80% of the salary of what the Auditor General and the Controller of Budget get for their lifetime once the 8-year term gets done. Do you think that's double speak, sir?
Yeah, this is an amazing development. First, let me start by echoing the sentiments of George AMG, but I'll be very brief on this. The Auditor General of any country is not just any official. This is the supreme auditor of the nation. And there's a reason why during their tenure in office and during their tenure after office, they are given all the protections, all the remuneration that they need to carry out the important task. Let me remind you and our viewers, in some countries like the US, the Auditor General has a term of 15 years, which spans almost 4 administration terms. There's a reason for that, because of the importance of the assignment. When I look at the wage bill for the National Treasury for the country, that is an entirely different matter. I believe the wage bill has been a mismanaged affair from the beginning. Our revenue base is inadequate for the expenditure that we're incurring, and also the composition of the expenditure is wrong. For instance, we don't invest in agriculture for a start. We do not invest in manufacturing. Those 2 very important areas. So other than debating the quantum of the wage bill, we should be looking more at the composition of what we are spending on. Certainly spending more money on the Auditor General is a good spend. It's a good investment on the nation. I'll leave it at that. Back to you, Elijah.
Yes, AG, let me just, before I go back to George this morning, I mean, yes, I understand what you're saying, and every Kenyan would understand what you're saying, that when you look at these 2 offices, they hold the importance that we need to recognize in our constitution. Fine, but shouldn't we therefore be talking about if it's okay for us to give them 30% gratuity for a country that is struggling to manage its current expenditure? Shouldn't we say this should be the way out for most of our recovered expenditure, instead of saying, we're already struggling, but we gotta find a way for them?
In fact, Elijah, you've hit the nail on the head. The country is struggling with finances precisely because of that lack of accounting systems.
Yes.
So therefore, the need for the auditor's services are greater, not less. They're greater. That's the reason we're struggling in as a nation in our finances.
Yes.
So we need more accounting, not less accounting, more accountability of public money.
Yes, pretty much. Let me bring in George this morning as well. George, fine. I mean, you have this government is telling you, well, we're going to try and do everything possible to make sure that a wage bill is lessened. But then, shouldn't they start from these bigger offices? Is that what they should start from?
I think Elijah, government has been paying what we call lip service.
Yes.
When it comes to managing our wage bill. Remember earlier in this administration, the president had mentioned that they were going to take salary cuts. I don't know if it came to pass, but my belief then was that this was a pointer towards what is supposed to happen in the civil service and in our public offices, so that if the president takes, say, a 30% or 40% salary cut, then this must be cascaded down now to ministries, must be cascaded down to heads of parastatals and all the public servants. I'm sure that Elijah, you've not seen that happening. So my take is that probably this is hot air. But Elijah, if you interrogate the finances of Treasury, then it paints not a very good picture. Normally, I don't like speaking negatives, but on this, I want to say that we are headed in a wrong direction, Elijah.
Yes.
If as Treasury, we cannot be able to pay our obligations as they mature, then it tells you that there's something that is amiss. You might want to say that we've had the pandemic, but the pandemic has been with us for, I think, this is now the seventh or the eighth month. So it is about planning. We did plan well for some of these facilities that we have, and the major reason why we are not able to finance most of our budget lines so that we go and borrow is because our recurrent expenditure, wages and salaries being a key component, is way higher than the rate at which we get our revenues. I don't have a problem with increasing the salaries or the retirement packages for our Auditor General or our control of budget. But as I told you, Elijah, that is not the intention of this bill. From my reading, yes. The intention of this is to use this as a Trojan horse, so that our members of parliament can increase their wages. And if that happens, Elijah, then what prevents other civil servants from agitating for increase in wages, Elijah? So that is it is something that if done now, it might be a Waterloo for the government, so that they might not be able to manage their wage bill. So I think the time is suspect, Elijah. The intention is suspect to me, and I think this is not the right time to even think of increasing benefits for any cadre of staff, be it in government or in private sector. I believe, Elijah, that even in the company where you work for, this is not the year that they are talking of increasing salaries. It is a wrong timing for any person to talk about increase in salaries at this time. I think this is time to try and manage the resources that you have, so that we can go through this pandemic to the next season, so that we can start trying to sort out some of these issues. So I would not support this bill at this particular time. But if it is brought at the correct time, then we can have a look at it as a country.
Pretty much, gentlemen. Let's move on to the next issue that we have for you this morning. Now, the Central Bank of Kenya directive to stop listing of mobile loans defaulters at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic in the country saw former digital lenders shy away from a market they deemed highly risky. Now, they saw reduced lending activity in this space, which saw lenders like KCB reduce the lending to just 5 billion from 10 billion in the same period last year, meaning they carried by half. Equity took a unique approach in the segment by giving loans to only account holders with a bank. I'm sure it recorded a drop of 14.3% to 45.7 billion, while KCB and PESA saw a drop of 60% to just 27.5 billion. Now, this led to a jump in fortunes for other lenders whose qualifications are not stringent, like Fuliza, which saw a 33.1% jump on lending to 149.4 billion. Obino AG, what is the state of mobile lending in the country in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic? Let's look into that, Obino.
Thank you, Elijah. That's a very, very important point. Mobile lending has literally taken off in the country. You've seen the lending by Safaricom through Mshwari and Fuliza. You've seen the mobile. The other digital lenders.
Yes.
So digital lending has taken off. The pandemic has actually enhanced the uptake of digital lending. But there are problems with digital lending. One is they are very abusive in terms of rates. Two, we have seen very unethical practices. Like we had a famous brand spying on people. They spy on your address book. They call your friends. They hound you to make your repayments. All those practices were essentially verging on criminal practices. And the CBK is quite right to say, I want all digital lenders regulated in some form or the others as non-deposit taking institutions. So I hope CBK can step up the plate and get some regulations up and running. The other thing you must look at is the uptake of digital lenders implies a failure of banks to support their customers with loans. So you have a very abusive digital lender on one hand, and also the failure of banks, commercial banks, to actually lend to the small man or the small SME, or Wanjiku if you like. So that captures the state of mobile lending in Kenya. In terms of quantum, I see this expanding towards possibly 10% of the total market in about a year or two.
Pretty much.
Over back to you, Elijah.
Yes, let me bring in George on that as well. George, I mean, the question that is going to come next is what position now do banks in this space, and how are they faring on with other informal players in the space? What position do banks therefore find themselves in this digital lending space?
Elijah, digital lending is where the market has moved. Remember, the first player in the market was Safaricom and CB at that time when they rolled out M-Shwari, and then Equity came into play,
yes.
And then KCB came into play. Several other commercial banks are going to join this frame in a year or two. That is where the market has moved. The traditional lending channels, Elijah, favored the more formal businesses, the more formal enterprises, other than the informal enterprises. Digital lending has come in to address the lending gap that the more conventional banks left, that is the informal sector. So that is something that is here with us, is going to stay here with us. My only challenge, Elijah, with this mobile lending is one, the cost of lending. I mean, the cost of lending in this market space.
Yes.
Some of the rates are quite high, Elijah. In fact, some of them go up to around 90% per annum. If you have such a rate in the market, then what you are encouraging is more of consumer borrowing, other than investment borrowing to invest. So in as far as you the providers of these facilities are growing their loan book year out and growing their profitability, the persons that they lend to slide more and more into poverty, because, Elijah, there is no business in Kenya that you can borrow at 90% and make money to not only repay your loan but also to return some income to you.
Yes.
So that is something that has to be addressed. How do you address that, Elijah? One is to address the risk inherent in this lending space. And one of the ways that CBK tried to address this is to allow some of these mobile lenders to list their non-performing loans with CIB, which I think was lifted when COVID pandemic struck in. But as we go along with this pandemic, I think that's something that has to be addressed, so that we reduce the risk in this market. And if the risk is reduced, then the lending rates will definitely come down, Elijah. But I think in as far as I'm concerned, that is where the market has gone, and you'll see most banks going into that space to try and fill in that demand. Remember, in early 2000, we had the personal loans. That was a craze in the market, and that is where all banks headed to. This season, mobile lending is the way to is the new market frontier.
Yes.
And most banks or most financial institutions are going to head into that direction, Elijah.
Yes. Owino AG, let's therefore address that part quickly before we move on to the last part of our conversation this morning. That regulation area. Good. You see, what the Central Bank of Kenya did is that these digital lenders cannot list you now in the country because they are considered informal. But, Owino AG, they are still in operation in this economy, and they're still exploiting the economy for that. Why haven't we seen a bigger move, therefore, from the CBK to have them in some sort of regulation? Is the CBK waiting for them to get exposed to a high risk, for them to run into getting considered as formal, or is the CBK pretty much saying, we want to push you out and give this space to the banks?
Yes, thank you, Elijah. That, in my view, is basically a failure of the CBK,
yes,
but more importantly, the National Treasury.
Yes.
The National Treasury has failed to implement regulations for what are called non-deposit takers,
yes,
which they have powers under the Microfinance Act. There's a section 3, I think 32A, which allows them to do that. So basically, it's a failure of regulation, failure of regulators. And the ultimate regulator to pass the necessary laws is the National Treasury. The second failure, Elijah, is the way to regulate these digital lenders is through consumer protection regulations, but not your plain vanilla consumer protection, but a very specific financial consumer protection bill. I remember in my time at the National Treasury, I developed one such bill that would have managed the non-deposit taking institutions. So until you can get a strong financial consumer protection bill, which addresses these digital lenders, then the CBK's hands are tied as well. So it's failure of A, National Treasury, and B, the central bank to get regulations up and running.
Pretty much.
Thank you, Elijah.
Yes, thank you very much, Owino AG. Let's move on to the last issue this morning. Now, data from the Central Bank of Kenya indicates that the Treasury Office cannot breathe a sigh of relief after 20.2 billion worth of matured bonds was delayed through conversion into longer-term facilities. Now, the Central Bank of Kenya gave investors who had purchased 25.6 billion worth of one-year Treasury bills in June last year an option to see it converted into a 6-year tax-free infrastructure bond as it sought to delay repayments. Now, the switch saw an 83.7% subscription, with CBK accepting 20.1 billion out of the 20.2 billion offered on a voluntary basis. Now, the Treasury will receive this latest conversion as good news at a time when Kenya's debt servicing costs have risen to 246.2 billion in the review period July to October, with the tax receipts dropping by 71.94 billion to 426.38 billion shillings. George, how timely is this latest conversion? And is the tax-free incentive in the bond a good thing for Kenya at a time when tax receipts are dropping again significantly?
Elijah, this is good news to the investors,
yes,
but bad news to the Kenyan taxpayer.
Yes.
When an organization or when a country is not able to finance its debt and seeks to restructure those debts to a more longer-term facilities, one, it draws higher penalties in terms of interest, and then two, the country is downgraded in its credit rating. So the investor will gain more in terms of interest incomes, and the taxpayer will lose more because they have to finance that increased interest income to the investors. That explains the reason why almost 80% of the Treasury bills subscribers agree to voluntarily restructure the TBs into infrastructure bonds. That points to a bigger problem, Elijah.
Yes.
Remember, these are local borrowing, and for local borrowings, it is easier to manage in terms of restructuring. But for the offshore borrowing, if you wanted to change the terms of the contract, then the laws of the country where you borrowed from applies, and sometimes you find that you are charged penal interest for requesting for a restructure. So I think it is a good thing for the investors because they're going to earn even more from the government of Kenya. But it is a bad thing for the taxpayer because what it essentially means is that our debt servicing costs are going to go up by a very big margin. And the government might reach a point where they're not able to borrow more to finance its budget. And when that time comes, Elijah, then that is where now you find the Britain institutions, likes of IMF and the World Bank, coming in with structural adjustment programs, which are very punitive to an economy like ours. So I think the pandemic has done us a big disservice by coming at this particular time. But I think this thing started happening way back in 2018 when we kept on accumulating our debt without knowing how are we going to finance some of these debts. So Elijah, it is not a very rosy situation for the economy and for the Kenyan taxpayer. You'll find that as we go into 2020, 2021, even as we want to recover from the pandemic, the government might be forced to increase its tax rate so that it can finance some of these loans, which might be very punitive and might not spur economic growth as we look into coming out of this pandemic, Elijah.
We know AG cleared this conversation for us this morning. Do you think, therefore, that this latest conversion is solely as a result of the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Thank you, Elijah. Elijah, let me be frank from the outset. Leave COVID out of our debt issues.
They don't want you to, man.
Leave COVID out, and I'll explain. I like two concepts to share with you and your viewers today. One is, if I borrow from the private sector, there's a new concept called a zombie company. A zombie company is a company that does not make enough revenue to cover their interest costs to lenders, to creditors. It's called a zombie company. I believe the same concept applies to a country. When more than 50% of revenue is spent on debt interest and debt repayment, that in the same definition is a zombie country, meaning a walking dead country, a walking dead country. The second word I want to share with you in terms of our debt is Greece. When you hear Greece, you think of economic collapse and being bailed out by the EU, IMF, and the World Bank. Elijah, we're in that Greek straitjacket today. And let me just remind you, the control of budget, the last control of budget, Agnes Odhiambo, when she left, our debt service was 38% of revenue. Today it's more than 50%. It makes us a zombie country. The second thing is the CBK is merely an agent of the National Treasury. They're not the principal. The principal borrower is the National Treasury. They're the institution that is tasked with getting our debt sorted out. And I believe the debt has run out of their ability to solve it. I'm looking at HIPC style bailout in the next 1 year by the IMF, and that will come with such poison pills that the country, such as the country has never seen before. So this has been building up for a long time. In the last 8 years, it has accelerated because of our appetite for commercial borrowing instead of concessional borrowing. So ultimately, the next Zambia is upon us, which is our own country, Kenya. We really are the next Zambia, and Zambia rhymes with zombie. Zombie country, zombie company. When our debt service exceeds our revenue, 50% of our revenue. Back to you, Elijah. It's a really tough position for the country.
Quite a gloomy picture you're painting there. Obino AG and George AMG. Thank you very much for creating time this morning to speak to Metropole Television. We appreciate you, gentlemen.